How are you all?
All right. Good morning, folks. Thank you all for being here. And for the members of the press, thank you here. Thanks for being here as well. Let me just first introduce some of the people that are here. I'll introduce my colleagues later. But among we have a number of elected officials. We also have Mary Davila on behalf of our senior senator of Florida, Rick Scott. Let me also really begin with the family members of the victims, those victims that were murdered in cold blood 30 years ago on Tuesday. Miriam de la Peña is here, mother of Mario Manuel de la Peña, who was 24 years old when he was murdered. Mario de la Peña Sr. is also here, and we thank you for being here. And also Melissa Chantes, who's the niece of Carlos Alberto Costa. Again, he was 29 years old when he was murdered. We have a number of also of elected officials. We will start again. There's the federal members will speak, but we are privileged to have the great mayor of this city, José de la Cruz. Where are you, Mayor? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Weston Commissioner and patriot activist Fabio Anda. Where is our dynamic supervisor of elections? We're done now. You never see another year. Or she's scheduled to be here, so she'll show up. Dariel Fernandez, the tax collector, are you here, sir? Scheduled to be here. Okay. Dr. Orlando Gutierrez Boronat from the National. All right, go ahead, interrupt me. You're gonna fly. He doesn't need an introduction. It doesn't need an introduction. Minoca Perez Castellon, thank you for being here. The voice of reason and of freedom. I just want to make sure that where's Rosa Maria Paya? Rosa Maria Paya, thank you for your patriotism and your sacrifice and your family's sacrifice. All right, that's all I have here. I'm sure I'm missing folks. 30 years ago Tuesday, two civilian airplanes on a humanitarian mission in international airspace were shot down. And those four individuals were murdered in cold blood. In cold blood. And while there have been some indictments, including the pilots, there was a conviction of a person in a conspiracy to commit murder, the murder of these four individuals. The main person, the person who ordered the murder in cold blood of these individuals, nothing has happened. There's been zero accountability. And now we're talking about 30 years of zero accountability. Well, that has to end. Because you cannot murder Americans in cold blood and get away with it and have total impunity. And that is what has taken place. But you see, we're not willing to forget when people are murdered in cold blood and just pretend that it didn't happen and just look the other way. So yes, it's been 30 years, but we will not forget. We have not forgotten. And you know what has changed, however, and why this anniversary of this horrific crime is different? Because we have a president of the United States who is not willing to see the murder of Americans take place with impunity. And he is willing to protect the security interests, the national security interests of the United States. And he's proven that time and time and time again. So while there have been efforts in the past, circumstances now, I think, merit a renewed effort to make sure that those responsible for this murder in cold blood, a premeditated murder in cold blood, for the head person, the one who gave the order, and by the way, who in essence has confessed to that, and there's clear evidence of that. We think it's time, actually it's past due, that that person also be held accountable, which is why my colleagues and I have written a letter to the president, copying the Attorney General of the United States, just putting out the facts that are plain to see, some that I've just mentioned and others, and asking that the president review, and if the evidence shows, as we are confident that it will show, because there have been so many reports on this, we are asking that the person who gave the order in a premeditated fashion to murder these 4 individuals in cold blood 30 years ago from next Tuesday be indicted for murder. It is time that this individual, that those responsible for this cold-blooded atrocity, murder of Americans, it is time that that no longer happens with impunity. I'm exceedingly proud of my colleagues and this community. This community has not forgotten. The family members obviously carry that pain, and we have not forgotten. And we are going to continue to push and pressure until there is full accountability for the murder of these 4 young individuals. Let me now introduce a person who needs no introduction. She has a long history of serving the people of Florida, but now she is doing it in the United States Congress, and she's doing it with great courage, with brilliance, and it is a huge privilege and honor to now bring to the podium our Senator Ashley Moody.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Buenos dias. I'm Ashley Moody. It is such an honor to be back in South Florida with my colleagues and the family members of some brave individuals that we lost 30 years ago this month. And this marks the anniversary of this tragic event. And while it was a time of loss and certainly devastation for the families that they left behind, some are with us today, it was also a rallying cry for those that had been fighting for the Cuban people, for their freedom, so that they could realize their God-given rights. And it really set the stage of a difference in leadership and the effects of supporting certain government structures. And it became symbolic for the people here that it is meaningful to dedicate one's life to fighting for freedom, especially those here who witnessed it, who had family members who had it taken away so easily. They understand continuously fight for and defend freedom. That is why Florida, right now, at this moment in time, remains a shining light, a beacon of freedom in this nation. In the middle of calls for collective warmth out of ignorance or lack of history or not an understanding of that false promise, it is so important now more than ever that we have people coming together to defend a people that fight against oppression and tyranny to this day. And we're here with colleagues that are demanding, insisting that we not forget those 4 lives that we lost 30 years ago, and that we continue to fight for justice for them. They gave their lives in that fight for freedom. And we owe it to them to show up 30 years later and demand that the person that ordered their murder be brought to justice. Now, I know this administration, This president cares about bringing people to justice. I know this DOJ will work hard and approach this case with renewed vigor, because I can tell you, not just standing here as the newest United States Senator, but I can tell you as a former Attorney General, as a former federal prosecutor, cases sometimes go cold, especially some involving murder, conspiracy to commit murder. Cold cases are often brought decades later. This case never went cold. This is a hot case. There is evidence then, and I'm hoping there is new evidence to corroborate, that Raúl Castro was involved in that conspiracy to murder the brothers to the rescue. And all we need is someone to charge into that hot case with renewed vigor and fierce passion and embrace the heat. And if we keep up our insistence that justice delayed not become justice denied, and that we bring accountability for these families, not just for the 4 individuals we've lost, but for all the lives that have been lost to the oppressive regime, and as a result of the leadership of Raúl Castro, we will indeed be delivering what America promises. And that is that we fight for victims, we deliver justice, and we always stand by those seeking freedom. So I stand with my colleagues today and recognizing this important anniversary. We should do this every year, but especially this year on the 30-year anniversary, and demand an indictment of Raúl Castro. Thank you.
We are in Hialeah, not in the city of Miami, so I'm delighted to be Hialeah Gardens, right? To be in your district.
Otherwise, the mayor will correct you.
That's right. Delighted to be here, and even more. And that was one of the thousands of murders and tortures and very bad moments that these people have put the Cuban people through. So the moment of truth has arrived, not only for this case, but for the Cuban people. The moment of freedom for the Cuban people is here. And what will be coming is going to be historic. As I say these words, I think of you, I think of my grandparents, I think of all my generations. I think of the generations before me. I think of the thousands and thousands of Cuban constituents that I serve in the district number 27, the city of Miami, who have waited 65 years to live a moment like this, a moment of truth. As I said, the Cuban people have endured torture, repression, and some of the darkest chapters any country in the Western Hemisphere has had to experience. And this is one of the most horrendous crimes committed by this regime, the shooting down of 4 planes, American planes with American citizens on board, just because they wanted to let the Cuban people inland or on the island what their human rights were. That's all your son was doing. And I am sure that you can never be able to live, and that the pain that you have to live through by having lost a child, a 24-year-old, a son, just because he was doing something that was good for the community, something that it's laudable and that you have to always carry it in your heart. I know it's hard, but you have to live with this great satisfaction and gratification that he did the right thing when he died, and he was doing the right thing. And because of this crime, shooting down 4 American planes in international waters, and two planes, 4 people, I'm sorry, 2 planes, 4 people, 4 American citizens, not because of this crime and thousands of others. I know that today the voice of God is going to fall like a thunder upon this regime and for what it has done. And thank God that Marco Rubio and Donald Trump are in the White House at the center of world power, extending a hand to the Cuban people. It has been reported, and I'm sure we don't know if it's true, but it has been reported that Marco is in conversations with the grandson of Raúl Castro. We don't really know if that is true or not, but we do trust that Marco Rubio is going to do the right thing for the Cuban people. Marco, as well as all of us, including me, we have Cuba in our DNA, and we know what is the right thing to do. So the question is, what are the Castro regime going to do? Specifically, his son, Raulito, as they call him. There are only 2 paths: the path of repression and defeat, because at the end, they no longer have the resources to be able to sustain repression for a long time, because right now, they do not have anything. They don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have electricity, they don't have medicines, they don't have clothes, and now the Cuban people do not have fear, because we are with them, and the Trump administration and Marco Rubio is at the helm. For that reason, we are asking them and to do the right thing and to allow the Cuban people to breathe the oxygens of freedom and to allow for the Cubans to live the abundance and the freedom that we have in the free world. The rest depends on them, but we do know, and I'm sure that all of us know, that the Trump administration and Marco Rubio is going to do the right thing, which is they are not going to waver, and they are going to allow for the Cuban people to be free at all costs. So this is the moment, this is the glorious moment. We're living history. And for the first time in 65 years, we have a great hope that what's happening in Cuba, the misery, the torture, and everything that the Cubans have had to live on this side of the island and on the other side of the island is coming to an end. So we're very hopeful. Thanks to Marco and to President Trump. And now, my colleague, Mayor, Congressman Jimenez.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Maria. And I too share your thoughts on that the days coming close. The days of this regime are numbered. But today we're here to talk about something that happened about 30 years ago, and I remember this incident, this tragedy very well. At the time, I was the fire chief of the city of Miami, and I remember that once it happened, there was a big rally at the Orange Bowl, and Madeleine Albright was there. And she had spoken some words that people got all riled up about. And I remember standing there and saying, we're not going to do a thing. And sure enough, we didn't do anything. And right now what we're asking for is justice. Justice for the 4 Americans that were murdered by the Cuban regime 30 years ago. Yeah, it was 30 years ago, but there is no statute of limitations. And what was the big crime? What were the brothers of the rescue planes doing?
Saving lives.
Exactly right. All they were doing is they were looking for balseros, Cubans that had flung themselves into the ocean, into the sea with inner tubes, with life rafts, with anything that could float to get away from this island, to get away from this regime. That's all they were doing, looking for these folks that were floating in the middle of the ocean so that they could be rescued. That's what Brothers to the Rescue was all about. They were in international waters. So what was it, about them that made the Cuban regime want to shoot them down? Well, it was that it was bringing a spotlight to the regime every single day, to the oppression of that regime every single day. And the evidence was There's people in the middle of the ocean trying to escape this place. And that's why they were shot down. That's why they were shot down. I guess you can sense my frustration. My frustration was, where was the justice for American citizens? 30 years ago. There were American citizens shot down in international waters by a communist dictatorship that's 90 miles away. What happened to them? Nothing. Nothing. Now we know that Raúl Castro ordered it because he's admitted to it. So there's evidence, plenty of evidence, to indict him. And yeah, it's 30 years later, but you know what? No statute of limitations, and justice needs to be served. Justice needs to be served. Those 4 Americans need justice. And that's why we're here. You say, wow, it's 30 years. And it's I was thinking about the as I was coming in, and I remember those days vividly, and we do have a different president. Like I said, when I was standing in the Orange Bowl, because we had that big rally, and I was the fire chief, and I had the privilege of standing in the Orange Bowl and actually talking to Madeleine Albright, I knew nothing was going to happen. I knew it. I just knew it, because that's what American administrations have done in the past. This is a different administration. It's a completely different administration. And so, what we're asking, and we already did, is send a letter to the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and saying, and to Department of Justice, asking for something, for the right thing to be done by these 4 American citizens. Indict Raúl Castro, indict whoever else was responsible for this murder, because this was murder. I mean, if you look back there, there's a portrait, I think, of a Brothers to the Rescue plane right up there. There's a Brothers to the Rescue plane standing out, out front. That posed absolutely zero threat to the Cuban government. Okay, all they were doing was trying to do good by rescuing their countrymen, Cubans, that were fleeing this island. And so again, it's a stark reminder of what exists in Cuba. It existed then, has existed for 65 years, exists today, and will continue to exist as long as that regime is in place. And that's why this regime has to go. This regime has to go now. The Cuban people deserve freedom. The Cuban people deserve justice. They are a threat to the national security of the United States. And this regime needs to go now. And so, with that, I'm going to bring back my friend, my colleague, my brother, Mario Diaz-Balart, back up to the. Thank you, Chief. Thank you. 2 things, if I may, and I ask the indulgence of my colleagues. I'm going to recognize 2 more people. This is not on the schedule. Silvia Riondo, I'm going to recognize you last. And Silvia Riondo, by the way, is not only a patriot, an activist, a freedom fighter. She was on one of those planes, by the way. She survived. It was the plane that was not shot down. But I want somebody else to stand up. Today, we're talking about, for obvious reasons, the murder of these 4 innocent individuals. And we're asking, as we've already stated, we put that in writing in a letter, as we said we would, of the indictment of the one who ordered the murder, premeditated murder in cold blood of these 4 individuals. We also did another letter, which I want to talk about, because the impetus for that letter is our newly elected tax collector. Will you please stand up, sir? Please stand up. Daniel Fernandez. Thank you. The law of the land of the United States is very clear that the sanctions on the regime are there until the conditions in the law are met. There are some exceptions to those sanctions, which include strictly humanitarian assistance. And let's be very clear, the United States always has and continues to be the largest provider of humanitarian assistance directly to the Cuban people. That's been the case, that continues to be the case. But what our tax collector found, and he did so brilliantly because he was getting every obstacle you can imagine from the federal bureaucracy, but in a brilliant way, he was able to find what we believe are direct violations of American law. Direct violations. And let me briefly explain what some of those are. As I mentioned, there are some explicit exemptions in the law for humanitarian aid. But nobody can argue that luxury automobiles, hot tubs, sports cars, jet skis, and the list goes on and on and on, that have been allowed by the United States government over the past number of years, that have been allowed to be sent to the island. Nobody in their right mind can think that any of those items are, first, humanitarian in nature, and number two, permissible in the law. And as we know, just because an American government agency tells someone in the private sector that they can do something that's illegal, doesn't make that legal. Unfortunately, the cruise ships and the cruise ship industry learned that the hard way when they were sued and received a very harsh judgment from a judge that mentioned specifically that just because somebody, some bureaucrat, or even a potential high-level member of the federal government says that something illegal somebody can do, does not make it legal. So we've also sent a letter saying that has to be reviewed, and that obvious abuse, breaking of U.S. law, the sanction laws, have to stop now. But the reason we have that evidence is because of this man right here. So we are indebted to you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you, sir. Now with that, I'm going to ask Silvia Ariondo, who doesn't need an introduction in our community. We know her so well, like everybody else here on the stage, to please say a few words.
Thank you. As you know, 30 years ago, 24th of February, 1996, at approximately 1:20 p.m. in the afternoon, 3 small, defenseless, unarmed, little planes that look and feel like motorcycles in the air left the Opa-locka airport en route to the Straits of Florida, to international airspace, to try to find that little spot in the ocean that would tell Brothers to the Rescue that there was a life, there was a man, a woman, children trying to escape the communist island in search for freedom. That was the purpose of that flight, the 24th of February, 1996. 3 planes left Opa-locka Airport. Only one returned that day. In that plane, Jose Basulto, president of Brothers to the Rescue, Arnaldo Iglesias, another member of Brothers to the Rescue, my late husband, Andres, and me as volunteer spotters were on board. That day, a heinous crime was committed. The most noble work of humanity is that of saving lives. And this for Carlos, Armando, Mario, and Pablo could have been that Saturday anywhere in the beach, having fun, but no. They were on a humanitarian mission to save lives. 3 American citizens, 1 legal resident of the United States, that, by the way, had been saved before by Brothers to the Rescue. I'm referring to Pablo Morales. It was an incredible act that defies all sense of humanity. Throughout the missions and the flights of Brothers to the Rescue, more than 5,000 lives were saved in more than 2,000 flights to the Straits of Florida in international airspace. 30 years have gone by. There were a lot of statements made. President Clinton promised the families that justice would be done. And we are here today, and justice still hasn't been done. There can be no peace unless there is justice. And that's why it's so important. And we thank our members of Congress and the families that are here today that still have not been able to get that justice they deserve, as any family would. So that's why we're here, supporting our members of Congress and demanding that Raúl Castro, who is still alive, there were two that ordered the shootdown, Fidel Castro and Raúl Castro. Fidel Castro passed away, nothing was done, in spite of all the promises and in spite of everything. But now we have an opportunity. Raúl Castro is still alive, and justice needs to be done for the family, for a community, and for humankind. Thank you very much.
We will do, please bear with us. We're gonna do very short statements in Spanish, and then we will take your questions. And thank you to the members of the press. Muy brevemente. Este es otro aniversario de esa tragedia que ocurrió hace 30 años, donde dos avionetas que estaban solamente salvando vidas sobre el mar, volando sobre el mar, voluntarios volando sobre el mar, buscando esas personas que pueden estar vivas en el medio del océano, que se lanzaron al agua buscando libertad, algunas veces con una balsita o un pedazo de madera. Y estas avionetas lo único que estaban haciendo era tratando de rescatar, primero encontrar y rescatar a estos individuos, salvando vidas. Y por eso fueron derribados dos avionetas. Y 4 valientes individuos, vino 3 ciudadanos norteamericanos y un residente de este país, fueron asesinados en sangre fría. Y los que ordenaron ese asesinato nunca han sido traídos a la justicia. Eso se tiene que acabar. Y a pesar de que han sido ya 30 años, esta comunidad no se ha olvidado. Los oficiales electos de esta comunidad no nos hemos olvidado. Los familiares que tienen ese vacío en su corazón no se han olvidado. Y ahora estamos viviendo otro momento donde los días de la impunidad a esos que matan americanos, que envenenan a nuestro pueblo, a nuestra juventud, o esos que asesinan en sangre fría a nuestra gente. El día de la impunidad para ellos se ha acabado con este presidente y esta administración. Y por eso nosotros, los miembros del Congreso, le hemos pedido por escrito a la administración, al presidente y a la fiscal general de los Estados Unidos que revise los hechos. Y si encuentran, como sabemos que van a encontrar, la evidencia, que encaucen al que ordenó el asesinato en sangre fría a estos 4 individuos. Y el que lo ordenó, que sigue vivo, es el tirano Raúl Castro. Así que eso lo hemos hecho como un acto oficial. Estaremos revisando y esperando a ver la respuesta, pero confiamos porque conocemos que esta administración es distinta. Esta administración no está dispuesta a tolerar estos actos de violencia en contra de nuestro pueblo, de personas aquí en los Estados Unidos. Así que estamos aquí hoy por eso. Segundo, también. ¿Cuál es el título, Ariel, en español? El recaudador de impuestos de esta gran comunidad. De una forma brillante, por cierto, ha encontrado lo que nosotros pensamos son violaciones directas de la ley de los Estados Unidos. La ley está muy clara. Hay sanciones en contra del régimen hasta que las condiciones de la ley se cumplan. Sanciones contra el régimen de La Habana. Pero hay algunas excepciones explícitas en la ley. Por cuestiones humanitarias, asistencia humanitaria se puede enviar directamente al pueblo cubano, no al régimen. Pero lo que él ha encontrado es que por varios años ya se han estado enviando al régimen de La Habana, porque esto no va al pueblo, automóviles de lujo, vehículos de natación, hot tubs, jacuzzis. O sea, son cosas que suenan, pero que es totalmente, no solamente inmoral, pero además ilegal. Y por lo tanto, también mis colegas y yo le hemos enviado una carta a la administración, al Departamento de Tesoro y Comercio, que analicen esa evidencia que brillantemente Ariel Fernández, él y su equipo encontraron. A pesar de los obstáculos que él nos ha dicho, se encontró con la burocracia del gobierno federal, esa evidencia ya está ahí. Así que le hemos pedido también a la administración que pare esa violación directa de la ley. A 30 años de este asesinato, confiamos de que por fin va a venir la justicia al que ordenó el asesinato de estos valiosos individuos. Y para eso estamos aquí y le damos las gracias a todos ustedes. Déjame primero ahora presentar a Senator Moody. I'm not going to introduce you in Spanish, right?
It's okay.
Okay, no. Senator Moody is not going to speak in Spanish. That's right. But who will speak in Spanish is my great colleague, who is a joy to work with, Congresswoman Salazar, María Elvira Salazar.
Vamos entonces a hablar en español para aquellos medios. Encantada de estar con toda mi comunidad y con gente que cuando era periodista entrevisté y saludé y tuve una gran relación con ellos, al igual que encantada de estar con la senadora y con mis colegas y con defensores de la causa cubana. Ya Mario lo ha dicho, no hay que repetir, sabemos que han sido no solamente este crimen, que fue uno de los peores que está en los libros del castrismo, sino todas las barbaridades y todas las vejaciones que le ha hecho este régimen castrista a los cubanos. Pero las buenas noticias es que está todo por terminar. Sabemos muy bien cuando hablo estas palabras, solamente puedo acordarme de mis constituents, de los votantes, de la gente que yo represento, el corazón de la ciudad de Miami, el corazón del exilio cubano, de mis ancestros, de mis abuelos, de mis padres, de toda la gente que ha sufrido la separación de familias, las muertes, el estrecho de la Florida, estos 4 individuos que hemos hablado, que lo único que querían era ayudar a otros que estaban tratando de escaparse de la tiranía, poder llegar a tierras de libertad. La realidad es que estamos en el medio de la historia. Sabemos que las cosas son diferentes porque hay 2 personas al mando. El presidente Donald Trump en la Casa Blanca y el secretario de Estado Marco Rubio, al igual que muchos de nosotros, tiene a Cuba en su ADN por nuestros ancestros, por nuestros padres. Y sabemos que él sí va a hacer lo correcto. Y lo correcto es liberar a los cubanos de esta odisea. Lo que queda por verse es qué van a hacer los castristas. Sabemos que hay reportes de prensa, no sabemos si es cierto, no lo podemos confirmar, que Marco Rubio está en conversaciones con Alejandro, que es el nieto favorito de Raúl Castro, le dicen Raulito, tiene 41 años y hay un video que está en el internet que donde él está bailando y dice, esto parece que estamos en Miami. Eso es exactamente lo que el pueblo cubano quiere. Vivir en la abundancia y en la libertad que tiene las tierras, que tiene los Estados Unidos. Por eso Lo que queda por verse es qué es lo que van a hacer los castristas. Si van a permitirle si van a seguir oprimiendo, pero la realidad es que eso tiene un fin muy rápido, porque no tienen los recursos, no tienen agua, no tienen comida, no tienen gasolina, no tienen energía, ya el pueblo no tiene miedo. Ese es un curso de acción. Y el otro es permitir que ese pueblo cubano pueda respirar el oxígeno de la libertad. Esa es la manera correcta. Lo que sí sabemos seguro es que el presidente Trump y Marco Rubio van a hacer lo correcto, que es liberar a los cubanos de la opresión.
Bueno, gracias a mis colegas otra vez, Mario y María y Ashley Moody. Muchas gracias por estar aquí, toda la gente que está aquí. Yo no voy a hablar mucho, yo simplemente voy a repetir lo que dije en inglés, pero mucho más breve. Yo me recuerdo cuando era el jefe de los bomberos en el año 1996, estuve en la reunión que tuvieron en el Orange Bowl sobre lo que había sucedido con el Brothers to the Rescue. Y yo pensé en ese tiempo, había muchas personas que estaban diciendo muchas palabras muy lindas, pero que nada iba a pasar. Y nada pasó. Y ahora, ¿cuál es la diferencia ahora? Es que tenemos un presidente diferente. Un presidente que a mí también no me importa lo que dice el presidente, lo que me importa es lo que hace el presidente. Y lo que ha hecho, lo ha demostrado que es una persona de acción. Entonces le estamos pidiendo al presidente y también a la Attorney General, DOJ, que por favor miren esto otra vez y estamos buscando la justicia. Es hora ya para la justicia por los 4 americanos que fueron asesinados en 1996 por Raúl y Fidel Castro. Sabemos que Raúl ha dicho, tenemos grabaciones de Raúl diciendo lo que sí, que él fue la persona que ordenó que tumbaran las 2 avionetas. 2 avionetas que estaban involucrados simplemente buscando a cubanos que se habían lanzado al mar, buscando la libertad y huyendo el infierno que es Cuba, que era Cuba, que todavía es Cuba. Y por ese pecado lo asesinaron. Así que sabemos que este es un presidente diferente, sabemos que tenemos una administración diferente, una administración de acción. Le estamos pidiendo la acción correcta es la justicia para estos 4 americanos que fueron otra vez asesinados en sangre fría por el régimen castrista por ninguna razón. La razón era que le estaban poniendo la luz cada día a la realidad que era Cuba. Y ellos no podían tolerar eso más. Y por eso tumbaron esos aviones. Pero eso no es razón para tumbar un avión. Eso es una excusa. Así que no es razón para hacer eso. Y también es un acto criminal. Y nosotros esperamos un indictment criminal contra Raúl Castro y otras personas, cualquier otra persona que estaba involucrada en este asesinato. Así que con eso otra vez le voy a regresar.
Antes de nuevo, porque no se lo avisé a ella, antes de que Silverio Iriondo cierre esto. We'll take questions after Silverio Iriondo. I just want to, you've heard about the evidence, right? We keep talking about evidence. You know, some of that evidence, by the way, was made public by the press, by a Nuevo Herald, many years ago. And it's not only that it wasn't acted on, it's worse than that. That during the Clinton administration, they had that evidence and a lot more. And not only did they not act on it, they buried it. They buried it and they locked it away. They locked away evidence that showed, that implicated, frankly, almost in a confession of the murder of 4 individuals. And yet the Clinton administration not only did nothing, but knew that that evidence was there. And that, by the way, has been reported throughout the press throughout a number of years. So again, that's why we are asking for this again, and we have a different administration. Ahora le voy a pedir que para que nos cierre este momento solemne, pero también de esperanza, a Silvia Iriondo. Esto no se lo habíamos dicho antes, pero ella siempre sabe, porque llevan esto tan profundamente en su corazón. Nadie mejor que para cerrar esta conferencia de prensa que a nuestra hermana Silvia Iriondo.
Como dije anteriormente, han pasado 30 años. Durante 30 años han habido inmensas oportunidades de llevar esto a la justicia. Aquí no se está pidiendo otra cosa que no sea lo justo, que no sea lo verdadero, que no sea lo que procede. Mientras que no haya justicia, no habrá paz. Y mientras que no haya justicia, los familiares de estos 4 muchachos, 4 jóvenes llenos de sueños, de ideales, 3 ciudadanos americanos, un residente legal. Uno de los 3 ciudadanos cumplió 2 giras en el ejército americano por amor y defendiendo a este país que era el suyo, como era el suyo también para Carlos Costa, para Mario Manuel y para Pablito Morales. Me refiero a Armando Alejandre. Este es el momento, es ahora. Confiamos en esta administración del presidente Trump, confiamos en nuestro secretario de Estado, Marco Rubio, y confiamos en los miembros del Senado y del Congreso que nos acompañan en esta petición de justicia. No porque nosotros querramos, no porque nuestra comunidad quiere, aparte de todo eso, porque es lo justo, es lo necesario y es lo moralmente correcto.
We'll take some, the elected officials will take questions. I would ask you to please stick to the subject matter. Some of us will be around later if you have some other questions. So we will start, and who's going to start? Yeah. Hey, Lana.
2-part question.
Yes, ma'am.
Since President Clinton, there have been other U.S. presidents, and certainly South Florida has had its share of very powerful Cuban American conversation. Why hasn't that letter been written before now? And then, okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, Lana, no, good question, except that these efforts have taken place in previous years. Starting, by the way, from the beginning, like right after this moment. And I mentioned that not only were there communications, there were actually meetings with different administrations in the past. Recently, I reread, by the way, a meeting that was had by then Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen and Congressman Lincoln Diaz-Balart, where they were furious because they, and here's the problem, in a classified briefing, now that has come out ever since, in a classified briefing, they were shown some evidence, including this recording that has gotten a lot of play recently, that, by the way, was reported in the media here in Miami and Nuevo Herald, right? And by you yourself. And our members of Congress at the time discovered that the Clinton administration had that evidence and a lot more. And they literally put it in a drawer and hid it and kept it away from view. And that the Department of Justice, there have been reports on this, was actually looking at the possibility of indicting Raúl Castro and Fidel Castro at that time. But unfortunately, orders came from higher up, and this we're talking about the Clinton administration, to just stop that. And we've had that kind of incident time and time again. What is different now is that we have a different administration. Remember, what was the law from the 1990s was that the capital of Israel is, the historic capital has always been Jerusalem. And what was the law is to move the embassy, the US embassy, to Jerusalem. No other president did that. This president did that. This is a president who took action when an indicted drug trafficking terrorist took control of a country north of the equator. In South America, I'll let you tell you why I said that. My colleagues understand. This is the administration. This is the president that actually, after many administrations, not only was there an indictment in the Southern District of New York to Mr. Maduro, but there was even a price on his head during the Biden administration and during the Trump administration. This is the president that actually took action to make sure that these folks who were in essence killing, murdering, poisoning Americans face justice. So what's different? What's different now is we have an administration that we are confident will actually just pursue the evidence. And if the evidence shows, as we are confident that it does, that Raúl Castro should be indicted, that he will be indicted. So
just to follow up.
Yeah.
You segued into that
yeah.
section. So would an indictment then be the justification for U.S. military to stage that kind of operation and go into Havana and arrest?
One step at a time, right? Look, it is very clear, and this is not us saying it. The president has said it. The Secretary of State has said it. The administration of President Trump has been very clear that he's not willing to tolerate 90 miles away from the United States a terrorist organization, a terrorist country on the list of state sponsors of terrorism that welcomes in every other terrorist organization, Hamas, ETA, you name it, Islamic Jihad. All of these terrorist organizations are harbored in Havana. It has been the center of activity, anti-American activity. They've actually sent troops, as we know, to Venezuela, to Africa, including, by the way, fighting for Putin in Ukraine. And this president is not willing to tolerate that. And his policies have been very clear, very explicit, and by the way, I think are showing to be very effective. So this president has been very clear what his policy is. We are supporting his policies, not only vis-a-vis Cuba, but the Western Hemisphere. And this is a kind of a separate issue, which is, this is an issue of justice. 3 U.S. citizens and 1 U.S. resident were murdered in cold blood. The individual who ordered that has confessed to ordering that murder, and he's never been brought to justice. So that is what we were asking for. Now, does this administration need any more reasons or evidence to protect the national security interests of the United States? Clearly not. But I just think it's important to note that when you're looking at Cuba, Havana, it's a state sponsor of terrorism. It has been a thorn in the side of our national security and our interests throughout the world. And this president has been acting in a very responsible and I think forceful way. Again, this is just one more issue that has to be brought forward. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let me also answer it this way, okay? The stars are aligned. You have the right president. You certainly have the right Secretary of State. And also you have a very slim majority in the House where 3 people actually have a lot of influence. So that's the difference. Whereas before those things weren't the same.
I think it's a fantastic question. You're a very good journalist. And I think that just adding to what my colleague said is just there's political willingness. We have been asking, Ileana, Lincoln, and everyone that came before us has been asking the Democratic administration, specifically the Clinton administration, to do justice and to help the Cuban people. And you know that there was no political willingness, but now there is. And that is why the regime needs to understand, like Maduro understood, there's a new sheriff in town and has next to him a very big figure called Marco Rubio. So like Carlos said, all the stars are aligned. And thank God for that, because the Cubans deserve the same thing that we all have. But going back to your question, because I know you want the 30-second soundbite, it's political willingness. And that's why we know we're elected officials. We know that because there is political willingness coming from the highest instances for the executive branch. That's why we're sending a letter saying, hey, remember, this happened 30 years ago on top of 1,000 of other crimes and terrible acts on the Cubans. Please pay attention now. Please serve our community. Please understand that this is good for America. It's good for the Western Hemisphere. And we know that he is listening. That's the answer.
Let me just a follow up, by the way, just a reminder. Yeah, we'll do it. We have some time. Just a reminder to, to add to what my colleagues just said. Remember that there was one person, by the way, that was convicted because of conspiracy of murder, convicted because of the conspiracy to murder these individuals. And he was in prison in the United States, convicted in a jury trial. And President Obama literally released him and sent him back at the request and as a gift to the terrorist organization, the state-sponsored terrorism 90 miles away. And he was welcomed there with this huge PR campaign. But so when you talk about what's the difference, the contrast could not be more dramatic, which is why, as Maria Elvira Salazar mentioned, the stars have lined up. We don't forget. There is no statute of limitation for murder, and we're confident that justice finally will be served.
El encausamiento judicial contra Raúl Castro y a su ex Francis, como lo comentaba la congresista, Marco Rubio estaría conversando con el nieto de Raúl Castro. Ustedes se han notificado con el Departamento de Estado para saber si eso es verdad. Y la segunda pregunta sería, ¿están interesados en saber qué conversaciones estaría teniendo el Departamento de Estado con el nieto de que supuestamente asesinó a los 4 asesinos?
Sí, mira, muy buena pregunta. Primero, yo no voy ahora a hablar de los detalles de algunas conversaciones que pueden o no están sucediendo. Gracias a Dios, yo estoy en una posición donde trato diariamente con los temas de relaciones exteriores, el financiamiento y todo eso. Tengo algunos detalles de lo que está ocurriendo. Y esto es la clave. Me siento totalmente confiado en algunas cosas. Número uno es que si hay conversaciones, esas conversaciones no son de negociaciones, de concesiones, de ayuda, de respaldo. Si hay conversaciones, están basadas sencillamente en la política que ha sido muy clara, expuesta por el presidente de los Estados Unidos. Y es que ese régimen narco terrorista a 90 millas se le han terminado sus días. Esa es la única e igual que hubo conversaciones a los más altos niveles. Y el mismo presidente de los Estados Unidos dijo que él habló con hasta el narcotirano Maduro. Pero la diferencia es que cuando la administración del presidente Biden tenía conversaciones, era para ayudar al régimen de La Habana, ayudar al régimen en Nicaragua y ayudar al régimen en Venezuela. Lo que ha cambiado es todo, porque tenemos un presidente que no está dispuesto a aceptar. Él lo ha dicho públicamente, el secretario de Estado lo ha dicho, y nosotros repetimos lo que hemos estado diciendo por mucho tiempo. Y la administración ha puesto esta política explícitamente para que todo el mundo lo vea. La aceptación de este régimen a 90 millas se ha acabado. Y no hay posible oxígeno para ese régimen. No hay posible alivio para ese régimen. No hay un futuro mejor para los tiranos, el tirano o los que los rodean. Y por eso tienen pocas opciones. Se ponen para su número, como decimos vulgarmente en nuestra comunidad, o van a sufrir consecuencias mucho peores que la que está sufriendo y va a sufrir Maduro en una cárcel norteamericana.
Primeramente, gracias por el trabajo que hacen a todos los oficiales electorales. Una pregunta bien rápida. ¿Qué tiempo pudiera demorarse la fiscal general para hacer esto oficial el encausamiento de Raúl Castro. Un mes, 3 meses, porque realmente el pueblo cubano necesita respuestas y todos están esperando, bueno, el pronunciamiento del gobierno de los Estados Unidos por una fecha aproximada.
Lo voy a contestar en español, pero tenemos una aquí que era fiscal de Florida, así que no sé, eso muy depende. Lo que sí sabemos es que hay mucha evidencia. Y esto es algo serio. Esto no es una cuestión política, esto no es una cuestión emocional, es una cuestión de que estamos exigiendo la justicia por el asesinato de 4 individuos. Así que, Senator Moody, I don't know if you want to talk about what the process may or may not look like for, okay.
This, of course. So when you're looking at an old case, especially where co-conspirators presumably would have been tried, you have to start back at reviewing all of the evidence that would have been presented back to in that case before, whether that was to a grand jury, ultimately review all of the trial transcripts, determine what witnesses may still be available to assist. And of course, to bring an indictment, you would have to go through a grand jury process. Anytime you bring a federal indictment, you go through a grand jury process to seek indictment. And remember, to seek an indictment, you're dealing with probable cause that a person committed a specific crime. So if there is new and corroborating evidence that they have or new witnesses, they would also look at that to determine if that can overlay with something that may have been available 30 years ago. So certainly, it is going to be a process that will take time and attention of not just prosecutors, but law enforcement. But certainly, because so much of that has been available for a long time, it is a great place to start and overlay with new evidence as it becomes available or is available. Certainly, I am no longer a federal prosecutor. I am now a United States Senator, but I truly believe enforcing our laws is important. And I believe if justice has not been given to these families, it is high time to do so, if that is possible.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
We recently, on NBC6 recently aired the recording of Raúl Castro ordering the downing of the planes. That had existed obviously for 30 years. Could that still be used in this case?
They will have to look at what might be offered in a grand jury setting. There are certain evidentiary standards that are available in a grand jury setting to seek indictment, and those may be different than what is required for an actual trial where you're dealing with a different standard beyond a reasonable doubt and different evidentiary challenges. But all of that is considered when you're going through the evidence that is available, whether it was available 30 years ago or they've added to that since, or it's currently available because of maybe new witnesses. All of that would have to be considered. But again, many times having new prosecutors, new vigor, a new passion to bring a case to resolution, that can renew a case. And I have seen this time and time again as a prosecutor, as a judge, throughout my career, even when cases have run cold. But again, I remind you, this is not a case that ever ran cold. The evidence has been there. It might even be stronger now, depending on what they consider to present.
Congresistas, Martín dice que revelamos que durante la administración Biden llegó aquí uno de los pilotos que participó en la operación de Hermanos al Rescate. Este piloto, Pardo Guerra, está en este momento en una prisión federal, de acuerdo a la información que reveló el Departamento de Seguridad Nacional. ¿Podría ser un testigo clave en este caso? ¿Y qué saben acerca de lo que está sucediendo?
Hay, como dijo ahora la senadora Moody, que además de ser senadora fue fiscal, juez, experta en asuntos legales, ¿no? Hay amplia evidencia, hay posiblemente múltiples testigos, algunos que presenciaron y sobrevivieron ese asesinato y otros que participaron o tuvieron algún otro papel. Este proceso va a requerir que todo eso se revise. Los que posiblemente están en la cárcel, que quieren hablar, o que todo eso es parte del sistema judicial. Y lo distinto, ¿no?, entre el sistema judicial que existe en los Estados Unidos, donde rige el Estado de Derecho, y por ejemplo lo que hay en Cuba, es que aquí se sigue la ley. La tragedia que es en este caso, donde hay mucha evidencia Y sabemos que mucha de esa evidencia ha existido por décadas, pero en el caso, por ejemplo, el presidente Clinton lo engavetó a propósito, sabiendo, ¿no? Lo que ha cambiado es que ahora tenemos una administración que está dispuesta a seguir la ley, hacer cumplir la ley. Y por eso nos sentimos bastante confiados que si se hace cumplir la ley, basado en el Estado de Derecho, que el encausamiento a Raúl Castro va a venir.
Congressman, after Maduro was captured, Marco Rubio mentioned that they have given Maduro many different options to exit the country. Now that we've heard that Maduro is in conversations with Raúl Castro's grandson, is it safe to assume?
Yeah, Rubio, right? Yeah. The Rubio, yeah. Sorry, we got that. Rubio. That Rubio's in conversation.
Yeah,
It's-
Rubio is in
yeah, that's what
conversation
you
with Raúl Castro's grandson. Would it be safe to assume that a similar conversation is taking place right now? Some options being offered for the family members to leave the island?
Look, I don't want to put words in what, the Secretary of State may or may not be doing. Here's what I am absolutely confident about. The president's been very clear that the acceptance and the looking away and kind of the acceptance of a anti-American sponsor of terrorism 90 miles away from the United States that harbors numerous terrorist organizations, that harbors fugitives from American law. By the way, all of this has been known for decades, but previous administrations have looked the other way. And by the way, and some, like the Clinton administration, like the Biden administration, and like the Obama administration, have actually gone out of the way to help that state sponsor of terrorism 90 miles away. But so what we are very confident about is that the policy of this president, as he has stated and has been also restated by the Secretary of State, is the days of acceptance of that regime are no longer there. Number two is, as Secretary of State said in a Senate hearing, the law of the United States is very clear. By the way, in the law that had to pass House, 60 votes in the Senate, signed by the president, in those days, a Democratic president, the law is very clear. The law of the United States, as the Secretary of State says, requires regime change for normalization. And so we are very certain that this is a president who's a man of action, who will not tolerate, because he has stated that he won't, and we see what happens when he states things like that, that he's not going to tolerate this enemy of the United States that brings up other enemies of the United States 90 miles away from the United States. So that's why we're very confident that that regime's, that the days of that regime are numbered. Yeah, please.
Let me say this, okay? I was very heartened when the president said that Marco Rubio was going to have conversations and was having conversations, because he said that on Air Force One. Marco Rubio is a son of this community. Marco Rubio is Cuban American. Marco Rubio knows what these regimes do. Most of them do just try to talk to gain time, to wait you out, to get a new administration so that they can survive. All right. Marco Rubio knows that very well. And so if there's one person that I would want to talk to the regime, it's Marco Rubio.
¡Bravo!
If there's one person the regime doesn't want. So what's best for the United States is for Marco Rubio to have those conversations. What's worse for the regime is for Marco Rubio to be involved in the conversations. All right. And so that the president has placed that kind of confidence in Marco Rubio. Really, I think the three of us support that 1,000%. And so are there things that have to be negotiated? Yes. All right. They do. Okay. And you have to be pragmatic about it. I've also said that the transition to a free Cuba will probably be tougher than a transition to a free Venezuela, because Venezuela has a lot of natural resources, et cetera. Okay. But that step has to be taken. We have to begin that journey, even though we know there are going to be bumps along the way. We have to go there. We have to take that journey. And for me, President Trump is the right person leading it, and the right person to negotiate it is Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Add a little bit more just to, I I covered Cuba for 35 years, like I said, on the other side, and I agree with what my colleagues are saying. This is a different scenario. You have a 41-year-old, if it's true, and I agree with what Carlos is saying. Marco Rubio could have not been a better person to negotiate vis-a-vis with the Cubans. Now, who are the Cubans? Raúl is 97 years old. At 97, I'm not sure that your cognitive talents are very sharp. You have a 41-year-old. You have a 41-year-old. Yeah, but you know you're negotiating. I mean, so look at the scenario. Look at the scenario. I mean, Raúl is 97. You have a 41-year-old. Is his favorite grandson who used to be the head of his security apparatus. Who, as I said, wants to live and consume as if you were to be in Miami. So we are in front of a uncharted territory and in a very, very hopeful, because you do have in parallel a Cuban people who 2 years ago went on the streets, and hundreds of thousands of them from point A to point Z on the island were shouting "Libertad." That could happen at any time right now because they don't have anything, including electricity to water. Marco, who we all agree, said not long ago at a press conference that he was just waiting for an opportunity to help the Cuban people. Let's see what that opportunity is and what that looks like. So like Carlos said, this is not Venezuela. Venezuela has oil. They had a very strong democratic system. The Cubans don't, and they were negotiating. Before, 25 years ago. And on top of that, they were negotiating with the major capo, Maduro. Right now, we're negotiating with the grandson of the guy. So no, I'm not saying that they're negotiating. The Trump administration was negotiating or was talking to Maduro in order to create a path or a platform for him to leave. We do not know what's going to happen with Cuba. So that is why, but it's still very hopeful.
Yeah.
Por favor, en español para la audiencia cubanoamericana, que esto es tan importante. Por décadas hemos escuchado argumentos en contra del diálogo. ¿Cómo poner estas conversaciones en contexto si están las conversaciones con el nieto de la persona que quiere encabezar?
Es que estos no son conversaciones.
Son negociaciones.
Estos no son, no están,
¿No hay conversaciones?
no, es que no hay nada que negociar.
Conversaciones.
La conversación, no hay nada que tú puedes conversar con la otra persona para ver cuándo se va, a qué hora y bajo qué condiciones. Y eso es lo que los tres estamos diciendo. Yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que dice el Carlos Jiménez. Nosotros podemos conversar con el enemigo y Satanás para ver cuándo se va del infierno, cuándo abre la puerta y cuándo libera. Claro que estamos de acuerdo, lo acaba de decir Carlos, de que hay que conversar para ver si podemos hacerle al pueblo cubano estos próximos tiempos de una manera más fácil y que no haya una catástrofe más de la que ha habido. Ahora, nosotros sí sabemos, y esto estoy segura que hablo por nosotros tres, que la administración del presidente Trump, bajo el mandato de Marco Rubio, no va a negociar nada. Lo que se va es conversar cómo se van y cuáles van a ser las diferentes etapas de esta transición. Eso es lo que va a pasar. Yo no he hablado con Marco, pero yo sé que Marco sabe muy bien, porque su abuelo se lo dijo, como me lo dijo mi abuela, como se lo dijo su abuelo, de que con esa gente nada.
Sí, vamos a escuchar. Porque esa es una pregunta muy importante. Pero lo que yo he dicho por décadas y lo que nosotros hemos dicho por décadas y los que estuvieron antes que nosotros en esta posición han dicho por décadas es conversaciones para ver si te vas en avión o en barco, si te vas el lunes o el miércoles. Estoy hablando el régimen. Eso siempre es positivo. El problema es que con otras administraciones, particularmente, vamos a decirlo, todas las administraciones demócratas, cuando han tenido conversaciones, y por cierto, tampoco han sido negociaciones, porque cuando el presidente Obama tuvo conversaciones con el régimen de La Habana, no fueron negociaciones, fueron regalos, obsequios, concesiones y ayuda. Entonces, de nuevo, esto lo hemos dicho, ustedes lo pueden revisar, lo hemos estado diciendo por años. Conversaciones. para cuando el régimen se larga, sea el de La Habana, el de Managua, el de Teherán, eso sí. Y vamos a estar otra cosa muy interesante. El presidente Trump, él habla con todo el mundo. Es interesante, él está dispuesto a hablar y hasta reunirse con todo el mundo. Pero está muy claro cuál es el propósito. Y él ha estado muy claro. Este régimen a 90 millas no es aceptable. No es aceptable y que conste, como dijo María Elvira y como hemos dicho todos nosotros, no hay negociaciones para que el régimen pueda mantenerse en él, para que darle migajas al pueblo cubano. Aquí solamente hay una forma, una salida y un futuro para el pueblo de Cuba, que es la libertad absoluta y plena. Y la pregunta es si esos que el dinosaurio y los que los rodean quieren ellos buscar, y por cierto, yo no puedo hablar por la administración, pero yo creo, porque lo vimos en el caso de Maduro, que le dieron opciones. Si quieren ir a Rusia a vivir en Siria, perfecto. Esa es una opción que tiene. La segunda opción no es mantenerse en el poder, no es buscar alivio para el régimen, no es negociar para comprar tiempo. La segunda opción es que queden o como Mussolini o con Soleimani. Esas son las otras opciones.
En caso de que esas conversaciones no den fruto, ¿ustedes estarían de acuerdo con apoyar un bloqueo militar a Cuba?
Bueno, lo que estamos viendo hoy en día, que es interesante, por décadas hemos escuchado del régimen hablar de las sanciones impuestas, por cierto, por el Congreso de los Estados, primero previas administraciones, después el Congreso de los Estados Unidos, que son sanciones que se desvanecen, se eliminan solamente cuando ciertas condiciones ocurren en la isla. Y han llamado eso el bloqueo. Hoy en día, lo que se han encontrado es que, por ejemplo, el petróleo que le estaba enviando Venezuela al régimen, que como ustedes saben, los revendían, no era para ayudar al pueblo, los revendían para ellos utilizarlo para la represión y para que los funcionarios, los familiares del régimen vivieran como si estuvieran viviendo en capitalismo. Eso no está ocurriendo. Y ahora vemos que los Estados Unidos están utilizando las Fuerzas Armadas de los Estados Unidos para garantizar de que ahora que hay un bloqueo sobre eso, que ese bloqueo sea eficaz. Pero también no solamente es que se está utilizando ese medio. Vimos que cuando el gobierno de México, una forma realmente, bueno, mezquina, grotesca, la presidenta de México dijo, vamos a seguirle mandando petróleo por cuestiones humanitarias, cuando ella sabe que ese petróleo no llega al pueblo, ¿no? Vimos cuál fue la respuesta del presidente Trump. Perfecto. A cualquier país que trate de ayudar al régimen, por ejemplo, con envíos de petróleo, 25% de aranceles sobre cualquier aliado, enemigo, amigo de un aliado. La realidad es, ha cambiado el momento. Este es el momento, se le ha acabado el tiempo de ese régimen y estamos más cerca que nunca. Le damos las gracias a todos ustedes. Thank you all for being here and thank you all for being here. Gracias.